As the Rav holds that oatmeal is kitniot and is incapable of leavening, would oatmeal porridge be acceptable on Pesach?
I do not believe that oats are one of the Hameshet Haminim. Why do I think so? For a number of reasons. First of all, Rambam writes explicitly in Ilchot Hamesu Masa that the Hameshet Haminim are actually just two minim, two types of grain, three varieties of barley and two varieties of wheat. Rambam does not mention, and what is referred to in the Mishnah and the Rambam as shibolet shu'al, which is the modern Israeli term for oats, does not refer to oats. It refers to a variety of barley, and this is also what it states explicitly in Masechet Hala in the Talmud Yerushalmi. It's quite plain from the description given there that it's not describing oats, because oats, if one's familiar with the look of a stalk of oats growing in the field, it has this little sort of envelope at the top in which you have the grain, and it has no hairs or stalks or sharp spikes, as it were, growing at the top, like you do with some varieties or most varieties of wheat and many varieties of barley. And Shibolet Shu'al in the Mishnah, in the Yerushalmi, in the Rambam, is a kind of barley which has these straight, spiky hairs at the top of the stalk, and it looks like nothing like oats. That's already two reasons. A third reason is because there is no gluten in oats. If you try to grind oats into a flour and make it into some kind of a dough, you will discover, as I discovered, because I tried this many years ago, because I was curious, you will discover that it does not rise. No matter what you do, it will not rise. All those cultures over the last thousands of years with which we are familiar, that where oats was a staple food, none of them, like the Scots, for example, made oats into bread. Why not? Because you cannot make bread from oat flour. What you can do with oats is make porridge out of it, which is exactly what the Scots did. The Scots are famous for their porridge, and I think porridge is a wonderful food, and I happen to like it very much. But it's not something you can make bread of, and therefore it's also something you cannot make matzah from, by the way. And therefore I think that people who suffer from certain medical conditions and cannot ingest regular matzah are not actually, you'd say, they're hova, the miswah of eating matzah by eating a kazayit or more of matzah made from oatmeal. So who does say that oats is one of the Hamish Taminim? Rashi says so. It's true. Rashi does say so. And אני עפר ואפר תחת רגלי רש"י, רבנו שלמה זיכרונו לברכה, but I cannot for one moment believe that is the case, and therefore I do not believe it to be true. But and despite that fact, and despite having told you that I just now that I like porridge, I will not eat porridge made of oats on Pesach, because Rashi says it's not mutar, and I don't want to do something on Pesach that Rashi would consider asur, even though I'm convinced it's mutar. So I wouldn't do that, and I don't do that. I don't recommend. Excuse me. I don't recommend to anyone that they do this. But I do not consider oats to be one of the Hamish Taminim. I should add to this, I do consider one type of grain that is not mentioned, as far as I understand, in the Mishnah or in the Talmud. I do consider another kind of grain to be hametz, and that is rye. What we call today chiffon, again, in modern Hebrew is referred to as chiffon, but it's almost certainly not the grain referred to in the Mishnah by that name. So we're talking about a question of identification. There are terms that were used once, and the question is whether we use them correctly today for the same article, for the same species. And this view, by the way, that oats is not shibolet shu'al, mentioned in the Mishnah, is also a view plainly stated and supported by various facts by Professor Yehuda Felix in his books Hai wa Someach B'Mishnah and other books that he wrote, it's very dubious if oats were ever cultivated in Eretz Yisrael as a staple food. They do grow, a wild kind of oat does grow in Eretz Yisrael, here and there, but it's not at all, it seems that it was never cultivated as a staple crop, as opposed to Europe, in some parts of Europe, because it tends to do well in northwestern European climates, as does rye, by the way. Rye also is not a natural grain that occurs in Eretz Yisrael, but rye is a grain that does contain gluten. You can make a bread dough from rye flour. It's a heavier dough than wheat dough, but it does rise. It does, because it does have gluten in it. So oats are not actually chametz. If you have oats in your fridge or in your cupboard, you don't have to throw them away. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to sell them. You don't have to give them away. They can just keep them in the cupboard and use them after Pesach. That's what I do. But I would not eat them during Pesach. If you're a celiac and you cannot eat regular matzah, if that's probably a question that's coming up, I don't know. Is it a question that's coming up?
It's not actually on the list, no.
Well, I'll relate to it briefly now. What I say to people with these issues are as follows. It's a question of degree. Some people have what they call mild or moderate gluten intolerance. In other words, it's better for them not to eat gluten products. But they can get away with eating a kazayith or 2 kazetim. You only have to eat 1. But even if they 2 or 3 kazetim, kazayith, by the way, is 3 cc, which is a very small amount, the size literally of the smaller varieties of olives out there that you see on a regular basis. That is a volume. 3 cc is a volume, not a weight. It's a very small amount. It's about a third or a quarter of an average adult bite. So, a small bite of matzah is well more than a kazayith. So some people can get away with eating a kazayith or 2 of matzah, a leila seder, and they won't suffer any severe medical issue. If a person says, well, it might cause me a slight discomfort, I might have a slight stomachache the next day, maybe, but nothing serious, I would say that person is hayav to eat a kazayith of matzah nevertheless. Again, 1 kazayith of matzah, 3 cc, which, if you're talking about a standard machine matzah, the square kind of machine matzah that people are familiar with, we're talking about 1/9 of a machine matzah. In other words, if you break a piece of matzah into 3 strips, roughly, 3 equal strips, and then take the smallest of those 3 strips and break that into 3 pieces again, that approximately 1/9 or even a bit less of a machine matzah is a kazayith, because the machine matzah is thin, as you know, and what have you. So it's the wrong shape. It's difficult to imagine it exactly the volume of an olive, but that's what it is. That's the volume of in terms of volume. That's the volume of an olive, of a kazayith. A lot of people can get away with that, and I think they're hayav to do that if that's the case. Some people would experience a severe reaction, and in some cases it could even be life-threatening, even if they ate only a kazayith of matzah, because of the gluten. Such a person is clearly patur from the miswah of matzah, and not required to eat any matzah at all. The solution sometimes is suggested is matzah made from oat flour. I just explained why I don't think that's actually doesn't solve anything at all. If a person wants to eat that anyhow, at least the marit ayin, so it should look as if he's eating matzah, or he should feel that he's eating matzah, that's also fine. But I don't actually think you're being makam the miswah by eating matzah made of oats.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.
If you are inspired by Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to get involved in Torah Eretz Yisrael activities in your local area, please fill out the relevant form by going to the link which appears on the screen.